at the outset to say that this is a very complex area. It's the broad area of energy, and there's challenges with respect to many aspects of it. But I think broadly we can say that the two overarching things are the price of electricity that we're seeing. We're seeing this pan-European challenge where the wholesale gas prices really gone through the roof, and the electricity prices tied to that, and this is really what's going to affect consumers and vulnerable consumers in the months ahead. And then the other issue, which is often, the two are often conflated, but they are separate. The other issue is the particular challenges that we have in Ireland, and every country has its own challenges in terms of matching supply and demand, and Ireland has its, and there's mention in the opening statements about how tight it has been in the last winter and how tight it's expected to be in the coming winter as well. And I think that's broadly the agenda for today. And I think it's important that we understand that there are two very separate issues that are in discussion today. I might ask the first question to Mr. Foley of EirGrid. And your statement is very clear. I think you said that the growth in demand is not the core problem. And he said the core problem is the performance of existing plant and delivery of new generation through a robust auction, and that's the challenge. I might ask you in a moment to just elaborate on that, because there's certainly a narrative that's there that the growth in demand is actually the problem. And Mr. Foley, you did mention it in your opening statement, but I think it's a question for the regulator, and I suppose it's how we are where we are, where there are concerns around security of supply. And what happened, and what has been done to address those concerns. And I think we all want to come out of this meeting quite reassured that, we're not going to have blackouts this winter, and that consumers are going to be able to afford critical energy. I'll ask the Minister, and it's directed to the CRU as well, that broader pan-European issue, and we're seeing the wholesale gas price go up tenfold, and the electricity price is linked to that. So this is there's a train coming at us with respect to energy prices. Now, yesterday the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that radical reform of the market was needed, and I think, notwithstanding the national challenge we have in matching supply and demand, this really big problem is staring us in the face. And you might elaborate on what can be done to maybe de-link the price of electricity from the wholesale gas price, or what kind of structural changes do you foresee are necessary, and of course the CRU as well, what kind of measures in that context you would propose to protect the vulnerable consumers. So I'll go first to Mr. Foley.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose, to your own comment about the complexities, I'll just wait for a minute, maybe the Chairman. Yeah, to your own comment about the complexities of the conversation here, I suppose what we're trying to do is bring maybe some clarity and simplicity. One would be, I suppose, excused for thinking, based on public discourse, that electricity demand has gone up exponentially or in sort of wild proportions over the next number of years. But if you look at the raw data, and it's a matter of public record, our demand for electricity in the last 5 years has grown by 9%. Now, I suppose we were sort of trying to bring some balance into the conversation. That's not off the scale for a prosperous, growing, sophisticated Western economy. And I suppose the additional thesis one would add to that is that we should be able to cope with this. It's not exceptional. And the second part of my comment was, if the 500 megawatts of procured generation capacity in an auction had landed frankly, we wouldn't be having this conversation today, because we would arguably have more than adequate demand to meet supply. So what we're just simply trying to do is to bring some proportionality into the conversation, because the conversation has got rather noisy and at times, I think, lost sight of the facts. And that's really the purpose of it, is to help with the conversation.
Thank you, Gaelic. In terms of your questions around why are we here, I probably would respectfully disagree with some aspects of Mr Foley's opening statement, in that we know that growing data centre demand is a challenge, and that has been clear from advice that we've received from EirGrid, including in terms of letters that they've written to us, and which were lay behind our imposition of a new data centre direction in terms of connecting data centres. So we do think it is part of the challenge, and in fact the ability to accurately forecast this is also challenging for EirGrid, and I possibly would not accept that we've had a consistent forecasting of the scale of the challenge that we face at the moment. So that is an area that we do think is worth considering, and is part of the review that we're undertaking at the moment, where we think there are improvements that could be made in that process. And I think overall the challenges that we've outlined in terms of that rapidly increasing demand, which has proven that the data centre demand can be delivered more quickly than we have been able to deliver generation and transmission capacity to support it. And as Mr Foley said, if we'd had that delivery of the 500 megawatts, it wouldn't be a challenge, but we are in the position where there is delayed delivery, and that is the reality. So that is part of the challenge, those delays in the delivery of generation capacity, and then also that challenge around the reliability of the existing fleet, which has also been mentioned. So what we're doing about that, I think, is outlined very clearly in our programme of actions. More capacity needs to be brought on quickly. It will be brought on through the capacity mechanism, and we are working on options to improve the effectiveness of that capacity auction, and we thank EirGrid for their contribution to that process, and we look forward to their response to the consultation on how we can collectively do that. And we're also working on demand side, because we do think that is part of the solution here as well. In terms of this winter, I think Mr Foley has set that out very clearly. I think, as he said, there are no cast iron guarantees at the beginning of any winter. This winter poses particular challenges, but we have been working very effectively with EirGrid and other stakeholders to mitigate those challenges to the greatest extent, and we will remain alert throughout this winter. As new issues arise, we will come forward with the solutions to address those. And in particular, I think that further consultation currently underway on enhanced demand-side flexibility also has the potential to help solve our challenges. In terms of measures for customers, in addition to the protection measures we've outlined, I think we're willing to work with government on any measures, as we have, for instance, with the electricity credit scheme that has just finished. We're working to deliver on the PSO levy rebate as well, which affords some small measure of relief. But as Minister Ryan outlined, the scale of this challenge is huge. It's beyond anything we've seen, and it is going to require a whole of government response. Like, this is not something that any one set of measures on its own can address, but we do need to work collaboratively to support customers at this very difficult time. Thank you.
Before we bring the Minister in, Ms McAvilly, can I ask you just on the market question, the reform of the market? Do you want to come in on that? What's the role of the regulator now? I mean, the EU Commission President has said yesterday that serious, significant reform is needed, that the architecture isn't fit for purpose. What responsibility and power have you as an Irish regulator within the broader European context to reform the Irish market?
Would you like to, Jim?
Yeah, so briefly, we're part of the internal and integrated energy market of the European Union, so many of the design aspects of our market follow those regulatory rules that we do not have the ability to change or work around necessarily. For example, if one jurisdiction changes its own regulatory market, it can result in a reduction in price. But a consequence of that can be, and we're seeing the risk arise now in the Iberian Peninsula, that you would subsidise the electricity then of a neighbouring jurisdiction because your electricity is cheaper, and you export because that's the way the market will allow the electricity to flow. And that subsidisation won't just happen from an economic perspective, but it will also be a security of supply dividend where the electricity, because it is cheaper, would then flow in a particular direction. So, notwithstanding the fact that there are interventions that are possible, and we believe that Europe is now looking significantly at those, they need to be considered in terms of their indirect consequences, but also it is better if they happen at a pan-European level, because that means that in all jurisdictions the same rules will apply, and you won't have that arbitrage between different countries where you could end up subsidising another jurisdiction or reducing your own security of supply. So we would welcome any developments at European level, and we believe that that is the place for those solutions to arrive and arise, and we will follow that and contribute in any way we can, including through ACER, the group of European regulators. We also think it's important to state that for us, the UK is our electricity trading partner. So we believe it's important that when Europe is looking at its internal electricity market and how it will deal between European countries, that cognizance would also be given to the fact that for us, our trading partner is now a third country. And notwithstanding the fact that the UK is part of that, has agreements between itself and interconnection between itself and the internal electricity market, we need to ensure that we are part of that dialogue and that the Irish market is recognised where we operate against the framework of the internal energy market in Europe, but our main trading partner is the UK. So it's important that that is part of the conversation to protect the Irish consumer as some of these measures are being explored at a European level.
Great, thank you. I'll bring in the Minister.
Yeah, just to back that up, I had a meeting online with the UK Minister in early August, and our own officials had a meeting with the European Commission yesterday on this reform. And I think, to quote the President of the Commission, Ms von der Leyen, she said yesterday that we're now working on an emergency intervention and a structural reform of the electricity market. We need a new market model for electricity that really functions and brings us back into balance. And I suppose the context of that is the absolutely unprecedented increase in gas prices as a result of the war. And it is directly a result of the war. It started in the middle of last year, where the Russian government started to reduce the flow of gas into Europe. At the same time, there was also an increase in gas prices because on the Asian markets there was huge demand for LNG, and that saw vessels going to Asia rather than Europe, and European energy markets started to rise. We started to be aware earlier this time last year, that this price rise issue was significant and obviously a real concern. At the end of February this year, when the war started, obviously that spiked even further, and we had an immediate crisis in, as it seemed then, in both oil and gas and coal in the supplies coming from Russia. That price explosion that occurred in March this year then led to somewhat of a reduction. But what's happened in the last 3 to 4 weeks, and people can see it if the futures market for gas is readily available on the internet, but even in the last 3 to 4 weeks, the futures curve, the current price for gas, but also the futures price into next winter, has gone through a spike, gone through a level that is unprecedented. There's nothing has ever happened like this in terms of the increase. Not even the 1970s oil crisis is this level of price increase in this short time frame. And that's why across Europe now there's a realisation that it has to change. This is a bit debate that's been ongoing. My Spanish colleague, as Commissioner Gannon said, introduced some early measures, and there was a debate in the European Council over the summer months and prior to this in terms of what is the best, because this is not an easy thing to do. It's highly complex processes. What we don't want to do as we change, we don't want to undermine what Aoife McEvely has mentioned, that we have delivered now through an auction process early this year, gas contracts for new generation. We want to see that delivered. So how do we deliver those, but at the same time be part of this wider European reform, which in my mind is needed. There is an emergency meeting of the European Council, Energy Council, being called for next week. The exact mechanism, the Commission has not provided details on what they see as the approach. There are various proposals. The Greek government have also proposed, in effect, what would look for separation out, where you might have a renewable electricity market and a fossil fuel electricity market. I'm simplifying it right down. But the Commissioner were talking yesterday about that is the core of the problem, that the gas price is setting the price in the electricity market. How do we avoid that tenfold, more even 14-fold increase in gas prices, leading to a 14-fold or similar such increase in electricity prices? And that's what the meeting next week will look at and consider. These are two separate issues. The capacity issue is a real issue. We have to work on that, as both Mr Foley and the commissioners have said. We have to absolutely focus and deliver on that. But I'll be honest, in the scale of the potential impact on the Irish householder, it's this price impact due to the external shock by war, gas being used as a weapon of war in this war, is a factor of 10 times more significant in terms of the potential impact on Irish householders. We have to address that in a whole variety of different ways. The measures we mentioned here today in terms of fuel poverty strategy, obviously in the budget, and a range of other measures that we're going to have to look at. But they are separate issues, and the latter one, both are critical that we address, but the latter one is unprecedented and the one that really deserves our most rapt attention, because it absolutely threatens Irish business, Irish householders, and not just here, every country in Europe is experiencing it. We actually, if you look at the wholesale prices today, I mean, ours are at unprecedented levels, but they're quite significantly below the continental price, partly because we are part of a separate system. We're part of the UK gas connection system. And just to go back to repeat what Mr Gannon said, I think that then requires us to work with the UK government as well as the European Commission and our European colleagues. It is all interconnected. And even the UK market, their gas connection with Holland and Denmark, Holland and Belgium has been in full flow in terms of going from the UK into the continent at the present time. Similarly, because our French colleagues are experiencing a lot of difficulties in their electricity system, the interconnectors are flowing into France at this moment from across Europe, including the UK, and that has knock-on consequences for us, as he says, in terms of our ability and how our interconnectors work. This European system is an interconnected network system. It's a single market, and effectively, for gas, and that is driving a single phenomenon in the market for electricity, which is why this solution does have to come from a European as well as a national level.
Okay, thank you for that, Minister.
If I may just...
Mr Foley, go ahead.
So,
yeah.
We have two statistics in the report which are questioned, so we'll evidence those to you by separate correspondence in the next few days. The statistics on demand and the statistics on forecast accuracy, just to make that point, because they'll be questioned. We provide evidence of that.
Thank you for that, Mr Foley. Okay, I'll go